they do say that good things come in packages of 3, and I'm really, really pleased to have a very, very good friend alongside me, our W Series editor here at Downforce Racing, but also one of the chief people behind the ever-expanding Formula Nerds community. Emma Butterworth joins me. Emma, how are you keeping, and how's the family doing?
Yeah, I'm keeping fine in this wonderfully wet Glaswegian weather that we're having up here. But yeah, everyone up in Glasgow's fine.
Glad to hear it. And obviously there's a big move happening on the cards very, very shortly. So hopefully all goes well with that. Emma, the biggest talking point in Formula One history has finally hit us. Lewis Hamilton at the age of 35, following the Turkish Grand Prix at Istanbul just the other week, has equaled Michael Schumacher's all-time record of 7 Formula One world champions. I'm going to give you the first question, as I did with Jake and as I did with Matt Bishop. What were your emotions when you saw it or heard the news that Lewis had done what a lot of people had thought that Sebastian Vettel would have done, becoming a 7-time Formula One world champion and echoing what Michael had achieved up until his first retirement in 2006?
It was a long time coming. I think from 2020 just being a really strange year, not just for Formula One, but just in general. But we sort of knew that he was going to hit the 7. It was just a matter of where he was going to do it and when he was going to do it. I just think that it was the sort of the cherry on the top doing it in Turkey. Turkey is it was one of the best races of the season. We hadn't been there in 9 years. And what an absolute race it was. And it was a race that he shouldn't have won, going into that race. Lance Stroll put it on pole. And I thought, Hamilton's not going to get this. It's going to go on to Bahrain. But actually, he was an absolute master. He sort of struggled with tyres and grip, but turned his intermediate tyres essentially into slicks and was able to make the right decisions and the right calls, managed the tyres really well, and able to clinch the win. And it was just one of those races where at the end you're thinking, not only has he won the race from so far back, but he's now clinched his 7th world title as well. And it was just the cherry on the top from such a topsy-turvy, exciting weekend in Istanbul.
And not only that, a topsy-turvy season, obviously, with the global pandemic, which is still occurring at the moment. But obviously, Lewis didn't get off to the best of starts at the Red Bull Ring, obviously having the contact with Alex Albon going through towards the downhill section, towards the the last part of the track. That was a sign that things were not all they seemed in 2020, especially when you consider the fact of how much Valtteri Bottas has out-qualified Lewis. And normally we see Lewis at the top of the food chain when it comes to qualifying, but he hasn't had it all his own way. Valtteri's been the quicker guy on Saturday, but Lewis has done all his talking on the Sunday, hasn't he?
Yeah, Bottas does seem to be a quicker driver in qualifying. But I think that Lewis has had the better racecraft on a Sunday. I just think he's more on his A game on a Sunday. Valtteri, I think, really sort of struggles with, if he comes up on some issues, it's quite hard to recover from. He had a total of 6 spins in Turkey. And I think it was quite hard for him to keep his head together when he was really struggling. And I think it just shows, I'm going to be quite bold here and say that it really shows the difference in the quality of drivers. Don't get me wrong, Valtteri Bottas is an extremely good driver. He wouldn't be sitting in that Mercedes if he wasn't. But I just think that you've got such high expectations being pitted against a teammate like Lewis Hamilton. There is a huge amount of pressure there to challenge him, and he's never been able to do it. And I just kind of feel like where he lacks is just being able to handle certain situations not as well as Lewis Hamilton.
I think a lot of people have been saying, yeah, well, he's in the best car. Yeah, well, look at what we've had. Considering the fact since 2009, the only people that have won world titles are Sebastian Vettel, in his 4 titles from 2009 all the way up until 2010 to 2013, when he got fined spectacularly after the donuts in India. Nico Rosberg in 2016, and the rest of the time it has been Lewis. So just that, and he picked up his first title in 2008. But the cream always rises to the top. The best drivers end up in the best cars. Let's take for instance, Max Verstappen. He's a good fit for Red Bull Racing, and he's very much like Lewis in the fact that he's one of these rough diamonds that is yet to be polished. I mean, granted, Max is quite young in comparison with Lewis, who's over a decade his senior. You've then got Charles Leclerc, who is the Monegasque wonderkind at Ferrari, who looks to be taking them into a golden era. But that is a true thing. And people on social media, I think, I'm not going to sort of like say they need to wind their neck, and they just need to take stock that when, I think Jimmy Broadbent actually came up with a very, very good saying the other day. He said, like, where you had Senna, Prost, Piquet, Hunt, Lauda, Fangio, all those people that have secured. Jackie Stewart was in the best machinery back in the late 70s. These drivers didn't just win because they were the best at what they did, but they were the ones that were scouted and had the best machinery. And I think one of the biggest comments that I made back in 2012 when the news went public about Lewis is I said, as long as he gets that team around him, he will be literally unstoppable. And I've said this in both conversations to Matt Bishop and Jake Sanson, that if I'd have bet that he would have won his 7th world title in 2020, with the odds how they probably would have been in 2012, I probably would have been comfortably well off by now.
I completely agree. I think that the comments that are being made that he's only winning because he's in the best car is completely wrong. It is completely wrong. I absolutely hate seeing all these comments on social media that he's only winning because he's in the best car. But when you think back to when Sebastian Vettel was winning his world championships, Lewis Hamilton actually did come out and say, Formula One has become really boring. There's always one car dominating. And now that he's won all these back-to-back championships, he's got to be eating his words on that one, because he when Sebastian Vettel was winning, it was quite boring. You had the Red Bull dominating. So I can see people's opinions, but this is the sport. And you've got to look beyond the drivers, you've got to look beyond the cars, and then you've got to think, well, why have we got an era that you've got one particular car that dominates? Why is that? So you've got to look beyond the teams, you've got to look beyond the drivers, you've got to look at the rules that are set in place. They're allowed to do these things. So I completely disagree with that. But you are right. Any world champion has won in the best car. When Schumacher won, he won in the best car. Senna, he won in the best car. Fangio, he won in the best car. They won in the most dominating car of that year. And with this whole hybrid era, Mercedes have got it absolutely right. They were extremely proactive going into this hybrid era. They started the development on their cars a lot earlier than anyone else, which meant that when they came across issues, they came across them first, and it gave them the time to actually be able to sort these issues out and to be able to fight them and sort out the issues very, very quickly. But whereas the other teams didn't step on it as quickly as Mercedes invested a lot of manpower and a lot of time into the development of their car very, very early on, because they knew that the hybrid era was going to be extremely difficult. But they managed to put in the manpower, they put in the hours, they worked extremely hard. I'm not saying that any other team didn't, but they did seem to get it spot on. And this is why other teams were sort of falling behind slightly, because they were struggling to sort of try and sort out the issues. But Mercedes had already done it because they'd come across these issues a lot earlier. But I think the you've got a team pairing like Lewis Hamilton and Valtteri Bottas as well, both fantastic drivers, but Lewis has kind of got he had the edge over Rosberg, and he's had the edge over Bottas. No one in that car has actually been able to properly challenge him. With Rosberg, it was a lot of mind games. There was a lot of psychological things going on there in terms, and there was a lot closer racing, I think, with Rosberg than what there was with Bottas. But Lewis has always come out on top. And I think a lot of the comments that he gets about, oh, it's only the best car, I think he's completely wrong. Completely wrong.
I think I have to completely agree with you there. I mean, Matt Bishop was very, very vocal in what he said, that behind the scenes, because obviously, for those wondering, Matt Bishop worked with Lewis Hamilton from where Matt joined as communications and PR director for McLaren in 2008, having served some sort of gardening leave after his journalistic exploits in the paddock. That Lewis was an incredible hard worker, and that hard work mentality has been steeped from his days in karting. And that just shows that if you get those procedures in correctly at the right stage of your racing career, there is no reason why that cannot be implemented in any way, shape, or form to moving up the racing ladder. I mean, obviously there is still time for both Max and Charles to evolve as racing drivers. Okay, they're not satisfied. I mean, we heard obviously Charles' very, very expletive-filled radio transmission after Turkey because he was not happy at all, and he was very self-critical. But we saw that with Lewis, and one of the things that I remember when he was in his rookie season, he misses out on the title by 1 point. And the race that defined it all was Shanghai. And we see a driver now that has evolved to 13 years later, and he's taken a set of intermediates right down to nigh on the little bit of rubber over the canvas. I mean, you saw how destroyed those tyres were after 30 plus laps. That just shows the amount of car control Lewis really has and how he's been able to push Mercedes forward. And I'm sure that we haven't seen the last of him in Formula One. I think this seven titles will become 8. I mean, who knows? He could even hit it into double figures if he signs another 3-year deal and stays with Mercedes. I mean, that's more than feasibly possible. He's still got plenty. He hasn't plateaued yet.
He did say he's only just getting started. So that to me shows that he's still got the drive and the motivation to continue. There's been a lot of speculation about what he will do, whether he will re-sign for Mercedes and go for the 8. Will he retire once he's had 8 world titles? But I think the real test will be going into the new regulation changes and how Mercedes will actually be able to tackle that. Will they still be as dominant? And if they aren't as dominant, will Lewis Hamilton still be able to bring the team, wins? Will he still be winning races? And if he is able to, if Mercedes aren't as dominant, but Lewis Hamilton are still winning races when the new regulation changes come in, it just shows the caliber of driver that he really is. But I really hope he's able to grab that 8th world championship. I'm not the biggest Schumacher fan. Honestly, I've always found his style of driving quite unsportsmanlike, sometimes questionable in some races, and I'm sure that's an opinion a lot of fans share.
I think not just about Michael. I mean, Ayrton Senna was renowned for it as well. Let's not forget Suzuka 1988 and obviously 1990 when Prost was with Ferrari, and Senna just said, "I'm going to go for the gap, whatever happens." And I still remember Murray Walker's commentary. It still echoes in my ears to this very, very day. But yeah, you make a very good point about the regulations. I mean, obviously there's a freeze in terms of what can be done in 2021, and obviously we'll know that the teams are probably working hard towards just not an evolution. It'll be a revolution in what they do. For 2021, obviously, with now that we've seen that Fernando Alonso has been testing the RS18 around Bahrain ahead of his return to when the team turns to becoming Alpine Formula One team, not Renault as of 2021 with Alonso going alongside Esteban Ocon as your favourite driver. Daniel Ricciardo switches over to what's going to be a
Yeah.
bromance fest, I think, at McLaren with him and
Oh, I
Lando
cannot
Norris.
wait. I cannot wait for that. I mean, the partnership that Sainz and Norris have got at the moment is brilliant. But I think Ricciardo's going to bring a huge amount of banter and pranks and a lot of fun to the to the team as well.
As long as they don't put them in the same press conference like they did last
Oh,
time.
wow, yeah.
That was I think one of the funniest ever moments in a press conference I think I've ever seen in Formula One history.
Yeah.
You trust Annie Rick to just sort of blow the doors off.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to touch on a very, very important subject, and that is the subject of inclusivity. And I've discussed this with Matt. I've also discussed this with Jake. And Matt said that Lewis is very much an activist now in how he is portraying himself off the circuit, as in, the T-shirts that he's been wearing. He's the one that's got Sebastian Vettel as his comrade in arms, and they both kneel on every single show of the end racism T-shirts that everyone is wearing. Not everyone is kneeling. The We Racers One hashtag from Formula One isn't there yet by a long stretch. I think we all know that in the racing community. But also the fact of how welcoming not just him, but drivers such as Romain Grosjean and Kevin Magnussen, who are out of Haas as of the end of this season, George Russell, Esteban Ocon, Daniel Ricciardo, were ever so complimentary about the fact that W Series is now going to support Formula One in 8 of their races next season. And that was going to always be the goal for Catherine Bond-Muir, Matt Bishop, everyone at the team. I know that they just signed a new chief commercial officer as well. And the high-tech partnership has now sort of been dissolved after the initial season, which rode alongside DTM. And Catherine was very, very honest with me in the press conference that we had, which you were a part of, that she said that without Gerhard Berger, we would not be where we are now. But the way that he has become this beacon for inclusivity for anyone that is of Black or Middle Eastern religion, creed, skin color, inclusivity. So obviously the trans, the LGBTQ plus, and obviously women in motorsport, because there are a lot of women within motorsport. There are women that are working within PR. There are women who are working. There's even one at Racing Point. You see, even in these day and age, there's so many times when teams change their names because Racing Point is going to Aston Martin next season. That there's even one from Racing Point that she's part of the pit crew, and she's also one of the mechanics on one of the cars. His voice is now sounding out more people. He's sounding out more truths. And I think from, yourself being a woman in motorsport yourself, that must be really, really nice to see that Lewis is being this voice for not just the Black and Middle Eastern communities, but for everybody. And he is saying that motorsport is for everyone.
Yeah, definitely. He has used his platform as a Formula One driver, as a world champion, to bring these things to the forefront of everything that he does. And I think that a lot of people who would probably not agree with what he's doing are quite misunderstood about why he's doing it. Working in motorsport as a woman, or Black origin, Middle Eastern, any sort of the minority groups, it is quite challenging. It is quite hard. This industry is a very male dominated industry, always has been. But since the introduction of W Series, there has been certainly a lot more women working in motorsport, not necessarily as drivers, but getting into motorsport in different ways through PR, in journalism, marketing, that sort of thing. You can see various women working for different teams. You had Claire Williams, who was the deputy team principal at Williams Formula One team. So there are more and more women coming to the forefront. I think what Lewis is trying to do is he's not trying to be that sort of like hardcore kind of activist. He's trying to raise awareness, and he's trying to celebrate the people that do work in motorsport, in these minority groups, and tell their stories, but also at the same time highlight an issue and saying, look, motorsport, the whole of the motorsport industry should be more diverse, and it should be more inclusive, and at this moment in time more things need to be done. He's not making a political statement. A lot of people will disagree with that and say, yeah, well, politics shouldn't be involved in Formula One, that sort of thing. It's not a political statement. He's highlighting an issue that has always been there, but because of the rise of social media, he's got, like, was it 21 million followers or something like that on Twitter now, and he's using his platform to highlight the issues. Years and years ago, we didn't have these social media platforms to be able to do this, and I think it's great what he's doing. But I think there are a lot of people that don't agree with the way that he's doing it. But I think he's doing a fantastic job in raising awareness, that motorsport should be more inclusive and should be more diverse.
Yeah, I've just actually been, as you were mentioning that, he's got over 6 million followers on Twitter. It's 21 plus million on Instagram. So
on Instagram, yeah, it's absolutely incredible.
It just goes to show that now that he has achieved what a lot of people thought that Sebastian would have done, had things gone well at Ferrari, or had Red Bull not dropped the ball, and obviously Renault, in terms of being their power unit supplier, could have been a very, very different story. But the biggest thing, I've come back to Sebastian, but it's for very, very good reason. And the show of sportsmanship echoed what happened in 2008 when the "is that Glock" moment happened, with Timo Glock going wide and then Lewis managing to get into 5th place. Felipe being gracious in defeat, but also because Sebastian has a very, very close link with Michael and the Schumacher family. To see him, I think it was the first time he's been on the podium since 2019. And for him to go up there, shake Lewis, who is completely filled with emotion while sitting in the car, realizing what he's just achieved after 264 starts, a total of 94 wins. What was this, 163rd podium? Total career points, I am looking at stats on this at the moment, 3,738. He's 3 away from getting 100 pole positions, and he's had 53 fastest laps. I mean, the statistics, they tell one just like microcosm of the story, but that gesture of sportsmanship just shows the real true character of who Sebastian Vettel really is, and that was really nice to see.
Yeah, it was quite emotional to watch, because Sebastian Vettel he's not on social media or anything like that. It's very difficult for fans to really get to know him as a man. Other, from what we know of him, we know him as a driver, as a Red Bull driver. We know him as a 4-time world champion and now a Ferrari driver. So it's quite difficult to get to know him. And I've been very critical of Sebastian Vettel in the past, especially when he was a Red Bull driver. I thought he was extremely arrogant. His style of driving, I thought, well, he's grown up watching Michael Schumacher. Michael Schumacher is his hero, his inspiration. So I thought they are very similar in the style of driving. But it wasn't until Sebastian moved to Ferrari and he's grown up a bit, and he's sort of kind of mellowed out slightly since going to Ferrari. And I think because the pressure was kind of not off of him, but it wasn't as prominent as his time in Red Bull. I think he's sort of chilled out a bit. He's become a bit more relaxed. You can see the real Sebastian Vettel kind of coming to the forefront, and because he doesn't have any social media, there was a sort of barrier there, sort of fans getting to know him. And I think we've seen a lot of that come out during interviews and press conferences. And it was just quite overwhelming seeing him. He hadn't been on the podium since, as you say, since last year. It'd been over a year since he'd had his last podium. He's had a very difficult time at Ferrari. And for him to come over to Lewis Hamilton and congratulate him, and the things that he said to him while he was in the car was just really incredible to watch, because both of these drivers are fierce competitors, fierce rivals throughout their time racing together. And it showed that the two of them have got a huge amount of respect for each other. And that was really nice to see on camera.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking at Sebastian's results from 2019. The last two podiums that he secured were both at Japan and Mexico, and his only race victory in 2019 was at Singapore. So it does go to show that since his Red Bull days, 2013, he won the title with a total of 397 points, and he won every single race from Belgium all the way to the season finale in Interlagos that year. I think he had, oh my goodness me, I think he had about 13 wins that season.
Yeah.
But you can see that obviously 2 years, 2017, 2018, were the best chances that he had to better Lewis. But I still remember that even though he did come across as arrogant in his Red Bull days, the sense of humour, very British sense of humour, which is unusual for someone from Germany. But I still remember when he decided to, I think it was 1 year at Silverstone, he decided to sport a tash in reference to Nigel Mansell. And it was broadcasted live, and it was absolutely hilarious. It just showed the character of Sebastian, but I think also the way that he has been at Lewis's right-hand side in this stand against ending races and more inclusivity, I think is just a part of the character of the man. He's married to his childhood sweetheart. He's got 3 kids, enjoys life when he's away from the track. But I think one of the funniest things that I've seen quite recently is when he and Ted Kravitz spoke about their first ever meeting 14 years ago, when Sebastian was so green behind the ears it was unreal, and he was in BMW Sauber colours when he was the test driver for the team when Nick Heidfeld and Robert Kubica were running in that squad. And now he's just 3 races away from leaving Ferrari, leaving Maranello, and heading to Silverstone with the Aston Martin factory team in 2021. So things could be looking up for that team, with Sebastian effectively being the de facto numero uno at that squad. Emma, thank you very much for your time here on Downforce Racing, and thank you for being a part of this wonderful 3-part special celebrating Lewis Hamilton.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.